Welcome back to Raw the Podcast. I'm your host, Allie, founder of TheCheekyClean and Conscious Cart, resources for helping consumers live more conscious. And I'm so honored to be here today with Drew Kanaba. Drew is an integrative health practitioner at Root Cause Wellness in Berea, Ohio. He doesn't treat, cure, or diagnose disease. Root Cause specializes in 7 forms of health, but focuses on integrative wellness as a means of identifying root cause and help provide healing modalities to our community. Drew, welcome to Raw the Podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure. I've known about you guys for a while. I'm trying to think how I first heard about you, but you guys did an event maybe last year, I think, last summer, that I was a vendor at. And that's when I really got to know all of the different modalities that you provide. I was so blown away by everything you offer and the vendors that were there, the purpose, and more so just like the mission that you have in bringing health and healing to our community. I've lived back in the Midwest area now for a few years. I lived in California prior. So I think I have this, larger perspective of what else is available out there health-wise. And we're still kind of getting there in the Midwest of having access to more forms of healing and healthcare. And so it's just really incredible that you guys have provided a vessel for people to heal in the community. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I want to talk a bit about you, about your business, about healing and health in general.
Yeah.
I'm very inspired by you guys. I think what initially intrigued me about you is your age. How old are you?
23.
20? You are? Oh my God. Even younger than I thought you were. Damn. That's really impressive.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you seem to be very disciplined and focused and grounded in your purpose for such a young age.
Well, everyone will get an understanding soon, so I'll go into it.
Yeah, definitely. And so your mom owns the space?
Yeah, we're actually co-owners. So
Co-owners.
we each are a 50-50 split.
Awesome. And how long has Root Cause been open?
November of 23. So about 2.5, going on 2.5 years.
Gotcha. So right kind of after COVID?
Yeah, like at the downfall when everything started to open and regulate a little bit back to normal.
So, and did you guys have this idea in mind for a while prior to, or was it something that kind of happened quickly?
We spoke about it for about 2 years prior
Gotcha.
to the vision actually coming to reality.
Yeah. And why did you choose that area? Just the space opened up?
It was everything.
Yeah.
It was, so we're big into our faith.
Yeah.
And so big into prayer, big into, what does God want us to do? And so it seemed it was a brand new facility. We were the first the first space that actually put an offer in. We were the first accepted, and there was about 15 places all offering at once. And we looked everywhere in Crocker Park, Avon Lake. Crocker Park's rent is ridiculous. It was like $12,500.
What? $12,500?
Yeah, in the space we were looking
Damn.
at. So we got it for cheaper, brand new place.
It's a beautiful space, and the square footage probably is ideal for you guys because it's like you have plenty of room to grow and then host things outside like you did for the event that I was part of. Like it's a lot of good energy to move and provide different modalities. So that's really cool. So I want to go back a little bit and learn more about you. Of course, we'll get into the details of Root Cause and exactly what you guys provide and how people in the community can get some healing and learn from you all. But you specifically, what I've learned in my own journey and others I've had the pleasure of interviewing who are moving from purpose is oftentimes it comes from personal experience and maybe challenge that they've overcome that's kind of illuminated or awakened them to this deeper sense of living and moving and driving them from the heart, which is why I started the podcast, like really to share these experiences because it seems to be like the lifeblood of what is driving so many towards a bigger mission. And I actually don't know your story. I know that you guys recently had a conference, which sadly I was at a conference myself in Vegas that I had planned before I knew that you guys were having it because I would have loved to attend. But the turnout looked incredible. It was called the Heal Conference, and you had I want to say what, like 30 vendors, maybe 20?
Yeah, we had 37.
37 vendors. Wow.
Yeah.
And how many people attended?
So we sold out at about 225 tickets.
Wow.
And then the 37 vendors, and then they all had a +1 to a +2. So it was a little over 300.
That is so badass. Congratulations. And honestly, thank you for bringing that to our community. Yeah. That is the future of health.
Yeah.
Is learning and supporting each other in our community and, helping provide awareness to ways that we can heal.
Yeah.
And I think it's not easy to put an event on of that size. So I'm sure it took a lot of work behind the scenes, but that's badass. But I've been seeing clips that you guys have been posting and you spoke at it. And it seems like there's been a lot of really positive feedback behind your story. So if you wouldn't mind kind of giving us a background on, how you've come to get to this space and what challenges maybe you've overcome that have brought you to being a 23-year-old who's a co-founder of a wellness business and an integrative health practitioner.
So 13 years ago in 4th grade, I was diagnosed with a crippling autoimmune illness called PANDAS.
Oh my
It stands
gosh.
for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorder Associated with the Streptococcus Infection. And so what happens is, as typically this presents in children about ages 4 to 7. Sometimes it can present a little earlier or a little bit later, but it's all within children. And this stems from a child getting strep throat. The strep virus goes inside the body and there's no alert. It camouflages itself into the body. So there's no alert to the immune system that there's an invader. And what happens is the strep virus goes throughout the body, bypasses the blood-brain barrier and starts attacking the brain, specifically the basal ganglia. And when that happens, it activates a ton of neuroinflammation. And that neuroinflammation then will cause a sudden onset of debilitating neurological and physical symptoms. So one night, in 4th grade, post strep infection, I went to bed healthy, happy, normal, and I woke up the next day with visual and auditory hallucinations that lasted on and off for about 10 years.
Came on like that.
Overnight, it presents this way in every child with PANDAS. It's a sudden onset. Debilitating OCD, very, very crippling anxiety. And the anxiety, I can kind of resonate with people in that sense because there's a misconception about OCD unless you actually deal with it. But the anxiety, I would have panic attacks 24/7. So my days would look something like this. I would wake up from a night of sleep, and as soon as my eyes open, I'd immediately start having a panic attack. So my heart rate would spike so greatly. It was like I was running a sprint. I would start sweating profusely. My whole body would start shaking as if I was having a seizure. And these episodes would last for about 45 minutes at a time. There were times where I would throw up, I would pass out because the anxiety was so intense. And then it would subside for a couple minutes, and then I'd be back in these episodes for 45 minutes, subside for a couple minutes, 45 minutes. And that was my day from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed. And there were so many nights where I would go to sleep, or I would be attempting to fall asleep, and I remember I couldn't because my body hurt so bad from shaking and the muscle contractions that would occur in these panic attacks.
Oh my gosh. And so these types of days lasted 10 years?
Like about 13 to 14. So
gosh, that's so awful.
So then obviously I had crippling depression from the illness itself, but I was also a slave to my own body, essentially. Like I was like a prisoner. Because, it was a sudden onset. My whole world shifted and changed so quickly. I fought suicide every day of my life. I had learning issues, so I excelled really well in all my classes. And then the very next year, when I went back and did all the state testing, I wasn't even scoring on the smallest scale on all the testings that previously I was off the charts in every category. For the physical aspect, I was sick every single day with some sort of bacterial or viral based infection. And then I could sleep for 24 hours straight, wake up exhausted as if I hadn't slept a minute.
Oh my gosh, wow.
So through my journey, my parents took me to every doctor, to more states than I can count. We did every treatment, every intervention, every protocol, every pharmaceutical, and nothing worked. And it got to a point where I hit my lowest in 2019 and actually had my suicide planned out.
Oh my God.
And
wow.
So after I was in this state, I would wake up every day, and I actually explained this at the conference, but I would wake up every day. And obviously it was hard because I was in so much pain. And the pain there's no words in the English dictionary that can describe the pain I was in. And And so between the pain and between me just being close with my family and my
Mm-hmm.
brother, I would walk downstairs every day thinking that it was my last time seeing them because there was just no way I could go on another day.
And how old were you at this point?
I think 17,
Okay.
16 or 17.
Wow.
And so when this happened, I just started praying like I normally would, and that God gives me strength because it was just so intense. And eventually I got out of this pit. So that pit was about 10 months. But once again, it was an overnight change from my state I was in to just completely rock bottom. And once about 10 months came, one day I completely flipped. Like I woke up in the morning and there was a complete shift in my symptoms. And I thought to myself, I wasn't excited yet, but I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. What happened? And then that state kind of lingered for a couple days, then a week, and so on. And then I was in such a better place for a week or two. And I thought to myself, what changed in the body? I wanted to understand from a biology and physiology standpoint, because if my symptoms can fluctuate this greatly from good to bad, from bad to okay to good,
Mm-hmm.
there has to be some sort of change in the body, because if there was an inability to heal, your symptoms would kind of just stay linear, but you wouldn't have these fluctuations. So I just knew if I could figure out what was changing, then I can actually have the ability to heal.
Right.
And then from there, that opened up the thought, if I can heal, there's so many kids with pandas that are in the same boat. There's kids killing themselves. There's kids who are bedridden their whole life. That was the other thing. I was bedridden on and off for about 10 years. So I thought to myself, not only how can this change my life, but how can I impact all these kids with pandas, right? What if I'm the one person who can figure this out? Because I went through it, I understand it. And there's two components, the doctors or counselors or psychiatrists, you can understand the science as well and as best as you can, or better than everybody. But if you don't go through it, there's a massive disconnect.
100%.
So
that lived experience.
Right. So I thought to myself, what if I could actually figure out the science plus, have this connection to all these kids? And from there, I made the decision. It was either, Drew, you're going to kill yourself. You're going to not kill yourself and be bedridden, or you can figure out how to heal and go all in on this. So that's what I did. And every day I was just reading PubMed studies constantly, every book I could get my hands on, the clinical research. And then I was implementing all the wisdom that I was obtaining from all these studies and books and, the top gurus in the industry. And then I was a guinea pig on myself. So I was running these experiments on myself. Then eventually I actually did the schooling, which completely gave me the last piece I needed to fully heal. But it took me about 5 years in that state to completely heal, 4 to 5 years. So then I started to heal so much that my mom and I had that discussion about opening up a clinic, because if I could heal myself, the philosophy was we could essentially heal anybody due to the complexity of my own illness, right? So in the beginning, the mission was pandas, but now the mission is to just impact and change humanity, by helping millions and millions of people healing and reversing their symptoms, ailments, and disease.
And taking that, 10 to 13 year span of hell and pain that you went through away from someone else and allowing them to diminish that down to a shorter period of healing to getting their life back.
Yes.
That's so powerful. I'm literally going to cry. That's seriously beautiful.
Thanks.
Wow, I have quite a few questions. So do you feel like you have an understanding as to kind of what triggered that shift from feeling like you were in your darkest place to then seeing the light?
Yeah, so I held the record, and I might still, at Southwest. I ended up getting 58 vials of blood in a sitting, and they did this over probably a period of an hour, and I had like 6 nurses around me. I had ice packs and juice boxes and everything. But I ended up getting diagnosed with so many different pathogens in the system. So I had like all at once, asbestos from the school I was in. I had mold exposure. I got diagnosed with Lyme, with mono, 3 different types of pneumonia. I had strep, I had bronchitis. Like I had about 11 or 12 different like debilitating viral based or, pathogenic exposures in one singular time. And then pandas also, you'll get flare-ups whenever there's any form of like systemic inflammation, which that all causes. And it was like debilitating. I wouldn't say all of them are debilitating, but mold exposure, for an example, or Lyme is like debilitating for, an individual. And then you accumulate 12 different pathogenic exposures in once on top of a kid having pandas, and it's just all hell breaks loose.
100%.
So I think it was that. And then over time, I think my body just started to regulate a little bit better.
So, and I think what's so challenging about most of those autoimmune attacks that your body was going through or that people experience is that it isn't so obvious on the outside.
Right.
Mental health, things like that too. And I think it's also these autoimmune issues that have become more and more common. Oftentimes, I think because of the environments, lifestyles many of us are exposed to, whether we want to be or not, or have control over it or not, it's becoming more and more popular. And the traditional medical route doesn't have as much understanding and answers, solutions for those types of illnesses. And so you're kind of stuck then on this hamster wheel of just like trying all this stuff and almost being this human guinea pig, but with things that also have side effects.
Right, absolutely. So yeah, we went to my regular doctor probably a week after the sudden onset, and his recommendation was an anti-psych or an SSRI. And my mom said, no, what caused this? He didn't have this a week ago, and now he suddenly does. And the doctor just shrugged his shoulders and prescribed me at the time where I was 8, just an SSRI.
8.
And yeah, right. So it's the system's backwards, the education's not there, and obviously you're not going to heal or reverse the thing when we are trying to, I tell all my clients every symptom and disease stems from deficiencies and toxicities. And you're trying to, and on the deficiency topic, one nutrient deficiency can cause up to 10 symptoms. So I'll actually have clients that have 10, 12, 15 deficiencies, right? Now you're up to 150 possible symptoms on top of, let's say, mold exposure, heavy metal exposure, gut dysbiosis, all the pesticides and glyphosate you're exposed to, on top of a poor diet, not exercising. And then you're trying to fix all that with a pharmaceutical, right? Masking and medicating symptoms with the pharmaceutical, and we're trying to replenish X, Y, and Z deficiencies and toxicities through a synthetic. And that's why, people don't get results.
No, and if anything, it's like a quick fix for short term, and it almost can yield more issues long term.
Yeah. So their solution for me was I was on high dose antibiotics for 7 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that decimated my gut, and that made healing
100%.
so much greater to accomplish, just because that in itself can take a lifetime journey to try to figure out how to rebalance your gut. So yeah, that was very difficult too.
Yes. So, wow. Okay. So you have a brother.
I do.
How old's your brother?
25.
You guys are really close in age.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and, I would imagine that this was a stress on your whole family.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it sounds like you really didn't have a quote unquote normal childhood by any means.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, it definitely was. I had a really great childhood until, 4th grade. Then my world turned upside down. And yeah.
So, and obviously your mom is passionate about this too, going through it with you, I'm sure is like, you guys have learned so much together and was a driver for why you wanted to provide this type of healing to others, other parents, other people who've been through what you've been through. Does your dad and brother live a holistic lifestyle as well?
Yeah, so my brother travels the world. So he is actually in Thailand right now, and he goes around the world and fire spins.
Wow.
So I don't know if you're familiar with
fire.
But yeah, with fire. Yeah. Yeah. So
like actual fire.
Yeah, I'll show you some videos.
Whoa.
But, so he does that, and obviously when we're across the country in different places, you are bound to live more of a holistic life. So like he would tell me for breakfast, he would sit at what we would call a diner, and you would look out the window and they would be picking your berries from the farm, right? That's right behind the restaurant for breakfast, right? And it's not sprayed with all the pesticides and herbicides and glyphosate that we're exposed to, and it's real fruit, non-GMO, non-lab made. And so like so many toxins and toxicity that we're exposed to that's normal in America isn't elsewhere. It's such as like the European example, right?
Exactly.
Like people can go to Europe and eat bread and pasta and pizza and lose weight, and all their gut issues are gone, and it's because they don't have all of the filler and crap in it that we use. So yeah, you're bound to live a holistic life elsewhere.
Just with exposure and awareness.
Right. And
totally.
then, yeah, my dad, he's got work to do for sure. But my
it is
mom
hard
and I,
to, I think, these societal norms, you know, of traditional medicine, commercial mainstream ways of healing, convenience, the diet, the lifestyles. I mean, these are things that are rooted in our culture.
Yeah.
And so it's almost having to reprogram the brain to live differently when it comes to living more healthy and to realizing that we are being exposed to this lifestyle that may be hurting us.
Definitely, yeah.
And I think it takes time and energy, and oftentimes it doesn't happen until you go through something yourself to feel that feeling of being so helpless at the hands of traditional medicine. My parents also both passed away and, you know, were healthy by all accounts of standard lifestyles, you know, but we have this constant exposure, and all it takes is the deficiencies or the toxicities, as you said, to root inside of us. And then we're trying to cure the issue with more toxins and more side effects. And it's really hard for the body to overcome. And I think it's powerful to have options. Do you, and this is too personal, that's totally cool. Do you currently take any mainstream medications?
No. I will never take a pharmaceutical ever again in my life. Yeah.
Wow.
No. I have my supplement regimen.
Right. So you've completely shifted over to a full holistic, even after 13 years of being in the system.
Yeah. I mean, because that's obviously when you understand and have the education instead of just like our med school that teaches you how to correlate each medication and pharmaceutical with each deficiency, but you actually understand where the symptoms are stemming from. Now we can actually have this whole world open up to us as to how we can heal the issue at hand. Right. So, and that's what obviously got me my results, was getting to the root cause of everything that I was dealing with.
Absolutely. And I've had quite a few functional medicine doctors on the show. And, you know, that's really the difference between integrative or functional health and the mainstream health care that's offered is, or what I would call sick care that's offered, right? Like we're more so treating symptoms in the traditional healthcare system, and in more of a functional or integrative approach, it really is like, why is this happening? The body is chemistry, right? And so if you can pinpoint what's off and find a way to navigate that, you have the opportunity for healing, which is so empowering. And, you know, hopefully more and more people can learn about as themselves and their loved ones continue to have issues, because unfortunately we are exposed to a lot of this type of environment that can harm us. So, wow, super powerful. So you did a lot of self-study and started to incorporate. Was there a moment where you were like, screw this, like I'm not going back to the doctor again, I'm just figuring it out on my own?
Yeah. So in that 2019 pit, I was working with one of the best. I think at the time he was ranked the #1 doctor in Ohio. And once again, he just inability to get me results. So then once those symptoms actually flipped and I made it through that suicidal pit, that's when I said I will never do Western medicine. Well, actually during that time, he was more of a hybrid. He was like both sides. But yeah, no. After that, that's when I was just done. And even prior to that, I was done. My mom was just hopeless and dragging me to every place possible. And I would say, I'm not going. And at that time too, I was going to about 4 to 5 appointments a week in 2019. So yeah, it was ridiculous. But yeah, so then I said, they can't get me results. I have to figure this out on my own.
Yeah.
And then that's
started the self-study. And then what was the schooling that you attended?
I got my certification through the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute, which is Equal Life and Dr. Cabral. So Dr. Cabral is a doctor of naturopathy and he teaches the school. So now I am certified in 7 forms of holistic medicine.
Amazing.
And I incorporate all 7 into different protocols, because everything with healing is about bioindividuality.
Absolutely.
And the only way to truly accomplish healing is tailoring a unique protocol for each unique case. And we're all different from like a DNA, a genetic standpoint, where all of our markers are. So one biomarker that if we run the same lab and we have the same markers and there's one marker that's off, that's going to completely skew the protocol.
Absolutely.
So that's what they
really taking an individualized approach.
Yes.
That's incredible. And also what's so different than traditional medicine, Western medicine.
Correct. Yes. And that's what I tell people too. It's like, if you have 1,000 of the same diagnoses, they're going to put all 1,000 of you on the same exact medication.
100%.
And it's like all of you are different. All of you are going to react different. All of you are going to have different side effects and so on.
That's my main concern when it comes to chemotherapy, is because it can be, I had a girl that was on the podcast, a woman who had pretty much stage 0 to 1 breast cancer.
Yeah.
And she got a double mastectomy, and they wanted to put her on the same type of chemotherapy protocol as someone who had stage 4. And that would have killed her. I mean, because that is a harsh treatment to undergo. And it just kind of goes to show you that there really isn't an individualized approach, even in some of the most harsh diseases that many of us are exposed to. And that awareness in itself of us all being individuals, I think, is important, even in this world of social media and blanket statements and diets out there. There's so much power in working one-on-one with a practitioner who can help you identify your specific biomarkers and your deficiencies and how you can heal. One thing isn't going to work for every person. Just one size doesn't fit all. And I think it's a powerful thing to have individualized approach. So what would you say is the common deficiencies that you see? Is it like all over the board, or are there a few that seem to be more common than others?
In terms of nutrients, I would say B vitamins, huge, vitamin C, NAC, which is the precursor of glutathione, which glutathione is the master antioxidant in the liver. And so you need both, and both of them work together to actually bind and remove toxins in the body. CoQ10, which is a mitochondrial support, is big. Obviously, magnesium, zinc and copper is pretty big as well.
Do you guys do any testing for MTHFR?
Yeah. So we have, are you familiar with the OAT, organic acids test?
No.
Well, so that's the most comprehensive test in the world, no matter what field of medicine you're in. And it's actually my favorite. And that's the lab so I got at the conference, I went into my story that transitioned into how root cause originated, the differences between Western medicine and what we do. And then I presented the OAT lab, because that is the test that gave me so many answers from what's going on from a cellular level, and that I use on hundreds of our clients. My whole point of this was it does test like a couple of different gene mutations like COMT, MTHFR, MTRR, which are 3 out of, they call them the super 7. So we have 23,000 genes. We have typically 7 genes that influence the rest of those 23,000.
Got it. And so a typical patient that comes in, you would recommend taking that OAT test, or if they're having certain symptoms?
So how we operate is based on symptoms, that's how we recommend a lab. So like on a micro example, when I first met my girlfriend, she was having her period for 2 months at a time, and then she was off one day, and that one day she was just spotting, and then it was 2 months at a time, off one day. So she pretty much just had it year round.
Yeah.
And so for her, right, we're going to run a hormone-based lab. But depending on the symptoms, that's how we recommend labs. And then we go from there.
Got it. So I've been my whole journey with MTHFR started because I have a highly engaged community, and I've been on this journey of, personal healing alongside people, just sharing and learning from their experience and vice versa. And I was having a lot of acne and realized that my gut was probably off. And so I wanted to start supplementing. And really one of the first supplements I started taking on a consistent basis was AG1. Yeah. And for me, it was good because I was so deficient that having something like that on a consistent basis every day was really helping me. Yeah. So I was recommending it to people. And then so many people in my community were telling me that they were having issues when they were taking it, bloating, digestive, all these different things. So I just personally went down this rabbit hole of trying to figure out like why this is happening to people. And I started learning more and more about how taking synthetic folate and non-methylated B vitamins, if you are especially carry the mutation, MTHFR, that it can cause some of those things. And so just learning more and more about it, I'm like, wow, so much of the population actually does have this gene mutation. Yeah. And I don't think we even realize that our bodies aren't able to process the nutrients from food that we're having properly, or even the toxins through our liver properly if we do carry that.
Yeah.
Are you seeing a lot of patients that do have it?
Yeah, for sure. So depending on the study, it says about 60 to 70% of the population has it, and it's more prevalent in women than men. I actually have it as well.
You do.
Yeah. So, but regardless whether you have the gene or don't, everyone should be taking the methylated versions, because if you take a folic acid or a cyanocobalamin, which is the cyanide synthetic form of B12, your body doesn't, and the cells don't recognize essentially the link that you're putting in the body. So everything goes through methylation, which is essentially, on a simplified version, everything has to be broken down, metabolized, and then converted about 4 to 5 times into the language or the form that the cells are familiar with. And so every single person, whether you have MTHFR or don't, or have other genes that inhibit methylation or compromise methylation, even if you don't have it, you have to break down folic acid 4 to 5 times before it gets into methylfolate, which is the usable form of vitamin B9. So regardless if you have it or not, I just tell everyone, why aren't we just using the methylated forms? That way you don't have to do a genetic test, and then it doesn't matter what genes you have, because it already has to get converted into that form, when we can just bypass this whole methylation conversion process, which, uptakes a lot of energy and takes a lot of energy to do, and we can utilize that energy elsewhere.
Couldn't agree more. I just recently launched a methylated hydrogen. We're actually going to talk about that. I just recently launched a methylated multivitamin because of that exactly. And I really couldn't find a brand. So many, I'm sure you're aware, just my background's in manufacturing, and so many of these supplement brands are being purchased by really large corporations. And we're seeing the trend of consolidation in the same way that we've seen in consumer brands in the grocery store and things like that. And the quality of supplements continues to plummet. And so my whole thing is just like finding the right product to be able to offer people that actually works. But definitely. I think that background on MTHFR is so interesting, because the symptoms for it, and with 60 to 70% of the population, that's a big number. And the symptoms for it can be anything from severe PMS to brain fog, anxiety, things that oftentimes, again, we go to the doctor for at a young age, and we're just like thrown on something like birth control or this or that to cure the symptoms. But it might be as simple as taking a methylated vitamin and addressing this gene mutation, so your body's not working overtime against it.
Yeah. And it's definitely important for the women who are pregnant as well, right? Because they get recommended a heaping amount of folic acid. It's about 3 grams we're recommending, or the doctors are recommending. And if you
as a prenatal.
Yes, for the purpose or the philosophy is it prevents neural tube defects and birth defects, but folic acid does not prevent that. What prevents that is the version of vitamin B9 it gets converted in before the cells actually utilize it, absorb it, and then use it for thousands of functions in the body. So if you have this gene mutation, when you start to dive into it, this is where a lot of postpartum stems from, because when you can't convert it, essentially the folic acid builds up in the blood as a toxic form, and then you get depleted and you have a deficiency of folate or 5-methylfolate, which is the usable form of B9, which has over 2,000 functions in the body. And then once again, you have this toxic form in the blood, which then makes women go wild. They're angry, they're having mood swings, they're crying. It's like a emotional roller coaster. And then they have the baby, they get off of the folic acid, and then all their symptoms go away. And it was never the pregnancy. In most cases, it was the actual nutrient that they couldn't methylate.
So true. And what's so wild is you're exactly right. Like, so many women are being told by their doctor to just take a prenatal that is so high in that synthetic folate, because so few supplement brands, more than 70% of supplement brands are not using the methylated version, because of course it's more expensive.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so powerful and so interesting, because postpartum depression continues to be an issue that's rising with so many women. So on the toxin side of things, what would you say are some of the most consistent toxicity issues that you're seeing in patients?
Gut dysbiosis, candida. So like that oat lab will test the whole biome.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of SIBO, a lot of candida. And then there's a section where where it tests Clostridium, which
Mhm.
is like the most pathogenic form of bacteria, and a lot of
Mhm.
people actually have that. So like C. diff, E. coli, things
Mm.
like that. And then that
Mm.
just drives, a multitude of symptoms and disease, because most symptoms and disease stem from the gut or have a correlation to the gut. And when
Totally.
you're in a dysfunctional state, you're in for a rude awakening.
Absolutely, and the gut and brain are connected, and it's, creates such havoc in the body in so many other ways. What do you think is oftentimes the cause of, say, SIBO
Mhm.
and some of those gut issues?
The most prevalent, in my opinion, is antibiotics, because what they
Mm.
do is the gut's a massive ecosystem, and we have two main components, but yeast and bacteria, and we need equilibrium throughout the body.
Mhm.
So 50% of the yeast needs to be good and 50% needs to be bad. Same thing with the bacteria. 50% needs to be good, 50% needs to be bad. And anytime you take an antibiotic, it completely decimates the entire ecosystem. And then there's more available space or a placeholder for the bad pathogenic
Mhm.
bacteria, yeast to come and grow back, and it always grows back with vengeance. And then if
Mm.
you never do a protocol to actually rebalance that, or get on a good probiotic during an antibiotic, one course of antibiotics can cause a lifetime of gut dysbiosis.
And when was the last time a doctor put someone on an antibiotic and also recommended a probiotic
Right.
too?
Yeah.
Never. Yeah, that's so interesting. So I can imagine you said that you took many antibiotics in your day.
Mm.
What do you do, or what have you done to help rebuild your gut?
Diet changes will absolutely modulate a lot of the gastroinflammation.
Mhm.
And then from the pathogenic standpoint, you really have to get on, and you can do it slower, but individual supplements that help with one, gastroinflammation, the gastro tract, the lining of your gut. So like
Mhm.
L-glutamine is really good.
Mhm.
But an actual like gut protocol
Yeah.
and that's something we offer, but there's a whole science to it where we actually will do a liver detox first.
Mm.
And what that does is it opens up the detox pathways, which a lot of us are closed up because we have 300 million man-made chemicals that are registered, and our bodies weren't created to take on this toxic burden. And so our livers aren't in an optimal state, our kidneys aren't in an optimal state. So what we do is we focus on supporting the liver and the kidneys
Mhm.
through certain supplements that we take while
Mhm.
opening up the detox pathway, so all these pathogens have an exit. And then we focus on replenishing the body very quickly through this shake that has every vitamin, mineral, amino acid, liver support. And so
Interesting.
that replenishes your deficiencies rapidly, which is one component of every symptom and disease.
Yeah.
And then after this 21 day, what we do is we go into a gut protocol that kills off the pathogenic bacteria, yeast, E. coli, and so
Mhm.
on, while also rebalancing the gut as well with good microbes. And so the whole point of the detox, one, obviously to replenish the deficiency so your body's in more of an optimal state. But when we can open up these detox pathways, now those pathogens have an exit to excrete from. So I also did do a lot of functional medicine
Mm.
as well in my journey. And the issue with them is like let's say they would start you on a detox, but they would never work on a lot of the support you need, such as the detox pathways. So if you're
Right.
someone, let's say with mold exposure, and you kill off mold, or you kill off, these live pathogens that don't want to die off, there's a Herxheimer reaction, which is a
Yeah.
die off. And then symptoms can also, I'm sorry, the pathogens can circulate in the bloodstream because there's no exit, because the
Oh,
detox
interesting.
pathways are a little bit closed up. So
Yeah.
when we can work on opening them, now they have an
They
exit to
have
be
an
able to
exit and a
excrete
space to exit.
instead of being in
Wow.
the bloodstream, and then you're more sick than you previously were coming in.
Yes. Wow, that's so interesting. Okay, so obviously you guys are offering protocols, everything from, and again, person dependent, diet shifts and anti-inflammatory diets, and, probably specific depending on what issue a person's having, to supplementing for deficiencies. What are some of the other modalities or treatments that you guys provide at Root Cause that people have access to and that patients have access to?
Yeah, so we have a lot. One, just everyone's probably familiar, but the vitamin IV drip therapy. That's one.
And just like, what is the difference between that and taking a supplement?
Yeah, so you're hooked up to an IV, which is hooked up to a bag of saline, which is about 1,000 milliliters, and that's your hydration. Then we can customize a cocktail based on if you did lab work, and we can see what deficiencies you have and what you need to work on, so we can replenish those through an IV. And that the reason it's so great is because you get 100% absorption due to the bioavailability because it's right in your bloodstream, right? Compared to when you take something orally, you only get about 15 to 20% because when it goes into the gut, all the acid in your gut breaks it up. And by the time it's metabolized and reaches the cell, you only get about 15 to 20% of the nutrients. So I think that's where that misconception with Western medicine, and they just say, oh, it's expensive urine, supplements and things like that because of the lack of absorption we get through an oral form.
Absolutely. Okay. IV options that you guys provide, and it's everything from specific vitamins and nutrients to like hydration.
Yeah, or you can walk in. A lot of people, it's more so walk-ins that we see a lot with like the flu or viral-based infections. Then we can customize a cocktail for whatever you're dealing with.
Absolutely. So what else?
So we are the only clinic in Ohio with the superhuman protocol, which we stack 3 modalities to give, the clients the best availability in terms of modalities to actually heal. So the first one is we call PEMF, but it's PEMI. It's a little bit different than PEMF. So it's PEMI, EWAT, which is oxygen therapy, then red lights. We do this PEMI mat, which focuses on cellular healing and cellular repair. So what happens is there's 70,000 frequencies in this mat that push blood flow, oxygen, and nutrients to any damaged cell. These cells can be cells that have been deficient for extremely long, have been exposed to too many toxins, even a cancerous cell. And when these cells can uptake and absorb oxygen that it's deprived of, they can start to function in more of an optimal state. But the focus that I really focus on with this is there's something called a low Gauss current, which is essentially a charge, and we're all electrical beings. And what happens is, the analogy I use is, think about if you hold a battery together on the same side, it repels. So the same thing happens with our red blood cells. So our red blood cells are what carry oxygen through our organs and our muscles and our tissues. And what happens when this Gauss current enters the mat and enters the body, since it's the same charge interacting, our red blood cells repel from each other. And each of those blood cells can take up about 1 billion molecules of oxygen, and then oxygen transport multiplies by 900%. So that's the important part as to why we do this first, and then an oxygen therapy second. But with that Gauss current too, on our cell membrane, every cell, we have 32 trillion cells, and every cell has a charge. So an optimal cell will be about -70 to -90 millivolts, and a cancerous cell will be about -10 to -20. And whenever it hits 0, then these cells start to die off. But what happens is all 32 trillion cells will actually start to decrease its charge. So it can go from, let's say if you have cancer, -10 to -20, and it can go to, let's say, -50 to -60 now, which an optimal cell is about -70 to 90. So that's the other aspect on how we can repair the cells as well.
So interesting.
Yeah.
And so you guys recommend the 3 together?
Yeah, so now you go, and there's more that it does. Pain, inflammation, also alkalines the blood for 12 to 15 hours, which when we can change the blood above a 7.3 pH, no disease, including cancer, can live in the body. So then we go to oxygen therapy next. So on Earth, we get 21% O2. On this EWAT, we get 95%. So oxygen's the most important element. If you think about it, we can go months without food, a couple days without water, you can go a couple minutes without oxygen. So we can change the saturation and the purity from 21% to 95%, while also all of these blood cells repelled from each other can take up 1 billion molecules of oxygen. Oxygen transport multiplies by 900%. You're now flooding your body of what it can take up and hold at the highest possible state. So, and then high oxygenated environments eradicate disease. So bacteria, pathogens, virus, even cancer, they don't do well and they can't live in a high oxygenated environment.
So interesting.
And then the third step we do is a 360 red light bed. It's the only FDA approved bed on the market. And it's a collab with Harvard and NASA, and these two came together and created this high-tech med bed. And so there's red light and infrared, which have thousands of therapeutic benefits.
Absolutely.
But the thing I focus on is the frequencies. So there's 4 categories of frequencies that make up each protocol, and Harvard Medical has a team that studies what frequencies do what in the human body and what outcomes it can give. So we have about 5,000 protocols we can choose from. And all of that is just from, Harvard staff and their medical team.
So interesting. Would someone do all 3 in one visit?
Yeah. So that's the superhuman. So you do the
Right.
mat, then you go to the oxygen therapy, and then you do the red light last. And the reason we do the red light last is the infrared component, I'm sure as you know, it penetrates the skin depending on the infrared, but ours is about 4 inches into the deepest parts of the cells and the tissues. And when that occurs, we can kick out toxins and toxic gases that are in the cell. And now all the oxygen you just took in from that EWAT can now dock into the deepest parts of the body,
That
which
is
then can
so
just
cool.
obviously eradicates disease and is just regenerates the body at just a absurd level.
Wow. So obviously this can be really powerful for prevention, but it also can be used for disease treatment itself. Do you guys have patients that come in that have cancer?
That's our most prevalent clientele right now.
Really?
We have a ton of cancer clients.
Wow.
And, we do share their scans a lot. So the ones that are consistent every week when they run blood work, or every other week, blood work scans, their markers are getting regulated more and more. Their tumors are shrinking. Some of them, their tumors are completely going away. And this on top of diet, supplements, exercise, and so on, just like any other autoimmunity or so on, it just rebalances the body. And when the body becomes back in balance, it can heal from anything. And I see it in my own life. I've seen it with so many clients. I see it with my cancer clients.
That's so empowering.
Yeah.
It really
and the
is.
water.
Yeah, let's talk about the water a little bit, because we both drink the same type of water.
Mhm.
Yours is Kangen, right?
Yeah.
Kangen.
Everyone says a different Kangen.
Yeah. Okay. So I personally used to get migraines all the time. And I also used to drink alcohol, not that I was drinking a lot, but I entertained a lot for my corporate job. And so I'd have a couple glasses of wine and things like that. And I was always like, oh, it's just from having some wine, whatever. But even after I stopped drinking, I would still get these headaches. What is going on? And so I have a friend who, and actually, it was at your event that I finally pulled the trigger. Now that I think about it, I didn't even think about that. But
probably Jenny. Yeah.
Jenny and I went to high school together. And so she had told me about it and was just I know you're going to be obsessed with this because you love this shit, And I'm was trying the water. I really liked it. But, it is hard to invest in something sometimes. For some reason, we have no problem investing in a vacation. But when it comes to your water, I'm I don't know, that's a lot. And then I was watching her do her little demonstration and I was like, okay, enough's enough. I just need, and I actually sitting in your parking lot bought it. And to this day, it's the best investment I've ever made for my health. I absolutely love it. And I, for real, have never gotten a migraine since, which is so crazy. But it's almost like I had not been replenishing my body in the right way. And even using a toxic-free water, which reverse osmosis pulls out toxins, I wasn't fueling my body with this electric water, as I call it. So from your clinical perspective, what is the water and why is it different and so powerful?
Yeah. So for starters, if you go on ewg.org, it's our water database, and you can type in your zip code and see all of the contaminants in the water. And each contaminant, the effect is cancer on every single one. But if it can cause cancer, it can cause a multitude of other symptoms and disease. And so that's the first thing, that we have a medical grade filter, and then the system itself will also completely dispose toxicity from the water. So now you're getting clean water. You can select the pH of your desire, which we go from 8.5 to 9.5. And when we can increase the pH naturally from electrolysis, that occurs inside the machine. So electrolysis, there's 8 platinum dipped titanium plates the water runs over. And since the water runs over these plates, it gets infused with a charge and it essentially separates from each other.
Yeah.
So there's 2 ports on the system, the one port is the acidic waste, the other port is the alkalized water. And we can actually start to drink water that's from electrolysis. It gets more free available ions in the water, which free available ions scavenge and bind to oxidation and free radicals that cause all sorts of toxicity and inflammation in the body, which inflammation is at the heart of every symptom and disease. Absolutely. And when we can increase the pH and add the more free available ions, this can essentially reduce the inflammation because you're scavenging and binding and removing the free radicals, like I said. And then the pH of the water, if you were to run, and I wish we had this here, but I show people all the time. So if we run water with, let's say, Dasani, it's about at a 2 pH. When you run ours, it's super alkaline. And when you dump the Kangen water into the Dasani, you will see the color change to an alkaline state. That is essentially showing that the more we consume of this, the more it will neutralize free radicals and acidic waste. And the more you can reduce acidic waste in the body, or reduce acidic waste and change the alkalinity of the body, this is where we can actually change the pH of the blood. So when we do that, that's where no disease can live in the body.
For sure. And I swear it's like my sleep is better, my energy is better.
Yeah.
It is almost like a supplement for the
Right.
body and a disease prevention in itself. And when you think about how, like you said, our cells, we're electric beings, our pH is so powerful. And most of the time we're kind of just, at best, if the water's clean, just passing by our cells and flushing our liver.
Yeah. Sorry. The last thing, there's extramolecular hydrogen infused into the water.
Yeah.
So if you go on hydrogenstudies.com, there's more studies and you have time to read about. But essentially, it just decimates inflammation, which, like I said, inflammation is at the heart of every symptom and disease. It's such a buzzword people just throw around all the time. But truthfully, if we can reduce inflammation, that can reduce a lot of individual symptoms and ultimately get rid of them.
Absolutely. So do you recommend the water to most of your patients?
Yeah. So we have a water membership that we offer.
A water membership.
Yeah.
Badass.
So, like you said, the system is a massive investment.
Yeah.
And most people can't afford it, or there's other obligations, which obviously makes sense. So if, once again, what we try to do is get the best of the best and then offer it to the public at a reasonable and relatively cheap price. So
Got it.
We have a 2, 4, and 6 gallon water membership. It's pickups are Monday, Wednesday, Saturday.
So cool.
And so the memberships will range from about $99 to $165. So $99 is our base, is 2 gallons 3 times a week. So you get Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, and then the 4 and 6 and so on.
That's awesome.
So instead, and then we also provide glass bottles too. So then there's no microplastic exposure.
And then you just bring them back and refill.
Right. And essentially when you break it down, it equates to about roughly $2 a gallon, which is about the same that you're getting from the convenience store, the grocery store, and you're getting glass and it's pure and hydrogenated. Alive, right?
Yeah, that is incredible. Wow. Okay, I'm glad I know that now because I do recommend it to a lot of people and it's really tough because most people are like, I just can't right now invest in the whole machine.
Yeah.
So to know there's a local option, that's, wow, really cool. Is there anything else that's at Root Cause that maybe is popular that people come in and do, even if they're not, say, like going through the full protocol? Don't you guys have like cryo?
Yeah, we have cryo, cold plunge, and then we also we got the hyperbaric the last couple months. So that's just another form of oxygen therapy. So, the superhuman, we really utilize the EWAT, but then the hyperbaric is its own form. So we have both forms of oxygen therapy. That's about an hour and a half you lay in. It's a pressurized system. And then we also implemented aesthetics. So my girlfriend's esthetician at our place.
Amazing.
And so we have about 1 room left and we'll probably get rid of the cold plunge just because it doesn't serve enough people. And our clientele is a very disease-based clientele that we have. So if we can get rid of that, we can incorporate, another modality in that room and then offer more healing.
So incredible. When it comes to your personal routine, what are some of the like non-negotiables that you have personally in whether it's your diet or your wellness routine in general? Of course, like, you're very versed and have access to a lot of different things that I'm sure you're doing different stuff all the time, but from like a consistent day-to-day basis, like what are your staples?
Yeah. Well, the water I drink.
Yeah.
I won't drink anything other than the water. I try to eat as best as I can a clean, whole food, organic diet.
And you do eat meat?
I do, yeah.
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 But you try to source local and
Yes. And it's very difficult, but and I try not to overcomplicate it. And once again, bioindividuality. So if you're someone with cancer, you kind of want to stay away from a lot of meats and
especially
go more
commercial.
Yeah, and go more so on like a Mediterranean plant-based diet. Once again, it's about goals though.
Yeah.
So if your goal is health and longevity, Mediterranean's the best. When you look at the blue zones, that is the highest life expectancy, and they're all on Mediterranean. So it just depends, once again, your goals, right? So for me though, organic, whole food, clean diet, my supplement regimen, then I would like to move every day. Sometimes we're just swamped to the point where I get home extremely late from work. So at least 5 days a week, but I would like to every day. Then I try to at least do the PEMF 5, 6 days a week,
Yeah.
just because that's the foundation. And when we can really focus on the foundation being the cells
Yep.
and rejuvenate and help support the cells, then the cells, every function operates from the cellular level. So that's the most important thing for me, in my opinion. Yeah.
What type of movement?
I switch up my cardio, but movement that will get me sweating.
Got it. So you do like a mix of cardio and strength training?
Yes, it's both. So either an incline walk, I'll run, intervals, things like that.
Yeah. Very cool. And then you mentioned at the beginning of the episode that God and spirituality is a big part of your life.
Yes.
Has it always been?
It has. Since I was born, I actually remember I'm a Christian. Or I don't even like that term. I follow Jesus. So, because man comes in and corrupts everything and gives you a bad idea of what this God is, right? And then it is a turnoff to a lot of people. So, I more so follow Jesus. But I've always had this weird, close relationship with God my whole life since I can remember, since my first conscious thought. And once again, I believe that is part of my journey. Well, I believe I have this calling on my life, and I had to go through everything in order to fulfill this will or God's will in my life. And ultimately, the mission is to change millions of lives and impact humanity. And once again, I had to go through that.
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to get through that is through a higher power and not by my own strength.
Absolutely. And that faith, that you've been able to cultivate, which I'm sure has been really like survival in some parts of your life.
Definitely. Yeah.
That's so powerful. What you guys obviously did the Heal Conference. What's next for you guys?
Yeah. So we're going to start running the Heal Conference about every quarter, 2 to 3 times a year. I told my mom we can't overdo it because then it loses its value. At least 2 to 3 times a year, obviously holding the vendor events that you went to just in our clinic, just to bring exposure to other people and us. And then social media, right? I told you I'm going to probably go all in on TikTok.
Yeah.
And then in terms of business, a lot of people talk about partnering up and possibilities. I met with, if you're familiar, but David Njoku, who's the Browns tight end. I met with his brother, who's a neurosurgeon, talking about different business opportunities that we can do. They own a gym, Njoku Strong. So once again, though, what I told him was, for so long, I had my own goals and my own desires. In the last couple months, I have just prayed that, truthfully, that God's will is done instead of my own, because it's like we're so 1 foot in, 1 foot out, like me. But then I also want to serve you and serve others. But I got to the point where it's no longer about me, but it's about doing what God has called me to do and serving people. And I don't know what that looks like, right? I don't know if that's 1 location. I don't know if that's 10. I don't know if it's 1,000,000, right? But I pray that, because we can only see the past and the present, and then this higher being sees everything and wants what's better for us.
Yes.
So how ignorant am I to say I want X, Y, and Z thing when there can be, this whole other life and world that's so much better for me, for him, for humanity as a whole. So I don't know what that looks like, but, head down, definitely grinding and just trying to help as many people.
So powerful. You're incredibly impressive.
Thank you.
You know a lot. And for your age, like I said in the beginning, I think you're leaps and bounds ahead of where, maybe a typical 23-year-old would be. I think it's a true testament to the experience that you've lived. And it's super cool that you're using that to help other people.
Thank you.
Yeah. And your faith, honestly. So we are going to offer the Cheeky community, the Raw community, podcast listeners, 15% off any modality at Root Cause. So we really want to encourage you guys to come in and try out Root Cause, see what they have to offer, whether it's getting an IV or meeting with Drew and seeing, if you're having some issues, things like that. If you guys know people who are suffering from disease, issues, or whatever it might be, please consider Root Cause here in our community as an incredible place. Do you do any virtual type stuff for people who may be out of state?
Yeah. So COVID obviously was a massive influence on this new world of virtual appointments. So we run virtual appointments. And so like at this conference, we had people coming in from Columbus and, those surrounding areas. So that was the question too. So we'll probably do a quarter of those on Zoom. And then even if you're 30 minutes away and you don't want to come in, we always provide, a virtual Zoom option. But ideally come in person just because face-to-face is so much better. But yes, we can still get everything done over Zoom.
Yeah.
And, the way our lab kits work is it's nothing at the clinic. So we can ship labs, you can pick them up, but regardless, you send them out from your home, which is nice as well. So it's no blood draws. You don't have to go to the hospital, your doctor. It's just simple urine, saliva, finger pricks, things like that.
Yeah. And maybe it's a situation where even if someone's like living on the east side and they can do the labs and certain parts of it from home, but then, come in for the protocol and plan around it and that kind of thing. Yeah. Amazing. So we're giving 15% off any modality at Root Cause with the code RAW, RAW. Where can everyone find you and your details?
Instagram at Root Cause Integrative Wellness, one word. And then our clinic is 1115 West Bagley Road in Berea, Ohio.
Root Cause Integrative Wellness.com.
Yeah.
And soon to be on TikTok. Take it over the world.
Yeah. But I'm going to branch that as my own personal brand.
Got it. So. Very cool. Drew, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing, but more importantly, for all of the healing you're providing to the community. I think back to, how hopeless my family felt when my parents were going through the system, so to say. And it's really powerful to know that there's someone like you and what you guys are offering to give hope to people.
Well, thank you.
So thank you so much.
That. Yeah.
And keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I definitely will.
Thanks, Drew.
Yeah, thank you.
If you guys liked this episode, please like and subscribe at YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find more episodes at TheCheekyClean.com/podcast. Please follow me at TheCheekyClean, where I have more educational resources and ways to connect you with healing coming. As always, it's been a pleasure, and we'll see you next week. Thanks again, Drew.
Yeah, thank you.